Marcus Reynolds sat quietly in first class, his casual clothes hiding his billionaire status. Flight attendant Veronica Winters approached, her face contorting with disdain. Without warning, she slapped him hard, her diamond ring slicing his cheek. Blood trickled down his face as stunned passengers began filming. Security rushed forward while Veronica smirked, completely unaware she'd just assaulted the owner of Skyline Airways. Marcus leaned close, whispering something that drained all color from her face. This single slap would trigger a chain of events nobody could have predicted. What happens when racism meets the wrong target? Before we begin this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and standing up against discrimination, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated with more powerful stories that expose the truth about racism in America today. Marcus Reynolds wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Growing up in South Chicago, he learned early that the world would judge him by his skin color before his character. His father, a janitor at O'Hare International Airport, would often take young Marcus to work, where the boy would stand mesmerized by the massive planes taking off into the endless sky. "Those planes can take you anywhere in the world, son," his father would say. "But first you've got to find your wings." Finding those wings wasn't easy in a neighborhood where poverty and racial profiling were daily realities. At 14, Marcus was wrongfully detained at an airport while waiting for his father, security assuming he was loitering or planning to steal. That humiliating experience lit a fire within him. "Someday," he promised himself, "I'll own an airline where this never happens to anyone." Through scholarships and working 3 jobs simultaneously, Marcus graduated from Northwestern University with dual degrees in business and aeronautical engineering. His innovative fuel efficiency algorithm caught the attention of industry veterans, earning him his first million by 26. Rather than join established companies, Marcus used his earnings to purchase a struggling regional airline with just 2 planes and renamed it Skyline Airways. Against all odds and industry skepticism about a black owner succeeding in the predominantly white airline industry, Marcus transformed Skyline into a major carrier. His secret weapon wasn't just business acumen, but a commitment to treating everyone with dignity. Skyline became known for its diversity initiatives and zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, winning industry awards for customer satisfaction and employee retention. Despite his $10 billion net worth and recognizable face in business circles, Marcus maintained a peculiar habit. He frequently traveled on his own airline incognito, wearing casual clothes instead of $1,000 suits, observing how his staff treated everyday passengers. "The true character of a company shows in how they treat people who appear to have no power," he often told his executive team. Recent reports of several discriminatory incidents on Skyline's Boston-Chicago route had reached his desk, each complaint mysteriously disappearing from the system before proper investigation. Marcus decided to see for himself, booking a first-class ticket under his mother's maiden name, dressing in jeans and a simple black sweater rather than his usual tailored attire. What he didn't know was that this particular flight would expose a cancer within his company that went far deeper than isolated incidents. The sharp sting of Veronica Winters' slap was just the beginning of a dangerous journey that would threaten everything he'd built. As the blood trickled down his cheek from Veronica's ring cutting into his skin, Marcus made a split-second decision that would alter the course of his company forever. Rather than immediately revealing his identity, he would play along. Sometimes, he reasoned, you need to let the infection show itself before you can treat it properly. "Sir, you need to move to your assigned seat in economy," Veronica had demanded, before the slap, despite the first-class boarding pass clearly visible in his hand. Years of facing discrimination had taught Marcus to document everything. The small camera disguised as a lapel pin on his sweater had captured the entire unprovoked assault. But there was something in Veronica's confident smirk that suggested she felt completely protected in her actions. Someone powerful had her back, and Marcus intended to find out who. The whispered words that drained color from her face weren't a revelation of his identity, but a simple promise. "This won't end here." She wouldn't realize the full meaning of those words until it was too late. "I've already shown you my boarding pass 3 times, Marcus stated calmly, as Veronica summoned security to first class, his cheek still bleeding from her diamond ring. The surrounding passengers shifted uncomfortably in their luxury seats, some averting their eyes while others brazenly recorded the unfolding drama on their phones. "This man is being belligerent and refuses to return to his proper seat," Veronica announced loudly, completely ignoring the first-class ticket Marcus held outstretched. "He's making other passengers uncomfortable with his aggressive behavior." Two male flight attendants quickly flanked Veronica, creating a wall of white faces staring down at Marcus. One of them, whose name tag read Bradley, leaned forward and whispered just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "How exactly did you afford this ticket?" Marcus remained poised, activating the recording function on his phone while maintaining steady eye contact. "I purchased it the same way everyone else did. My assignment is seat 2A, which is exactly where I'm sitting." Security arrived within minutes, two burly men who positioned themselves on either side of Marcus's seat without asking a single question. "Sir, we need you to come with us," the taller one demanded, already reaching for Marcus's arm. "On what grounds?" Marcus asked, still maintaining his composure despite the blood now staining his collar. "I have a valid ticket for this seat. We can resolve this issue off the aircraft," the security guard insisted, his grip tightening around Marcus's bicep. A middle-aged white woman across the aisle suddenly spoke up. "I saw everything. This man did nothing wrong. That flight attendant slapped him for no reason." Veronica's practiced smile never wavered as she addressed the woman. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but you didn't see the beginning of the altercation. This is a security matter now." More passengers began murmuring, many recording the incident. Marcus noticed how Veronica seemed completely unconcerned about being filmed, as though consequences simply didn't apply to her actions. "I'd like to speak to the captain," Marcus requested calmly. Veronica actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "The captain is preparing for departure and doesn't have time for passengers who can't follow simple instructions." Marcus nodded thoughtfully before saying, "Then perhaps I should call someone who can resolve this situation." "Who exactly do you think you're going to call?" Veronica challenged with a smirk. "The CEO?" "That's exactly who I'm going to call," Marcus responded, pulling out his phone. The security guards exchanged glances but maintained their grip on his arms. Veronica's smile widened. "Go ahead. I'm sure Marcus Reynolds takes personal calls from random passengers." Marcus simply dialed a number and put the phone on speaker. After one ring, a professional female voice answered, "Mr. Reynolds' office." "Sarah, it's me," Marcus said. "I need you to patch me through to Logan immediately." There was a brief pause before Sarah replied, "Of course, sir. Connecting you with the Chief of Operations now." Veronica's expression faltered slightly as Marcus continued. "Also, please pull the personnel file for a flight attendant named Veronica Winters on Flight 372 to Chicago, and send a copy of this recording to legal." Before Veronica could process what was happening, an authoritative male voice came through the speaker. "Marcus, is everything all right?" "Not exactly, Logan. I'm experiencing some concerning customer service issues that require your immediate attention on Flight 372. How quickly can you meet this plane?" The entire first-class cabin had fallen silent, all eyes darting between Marcus and the increasingly pale Veronica. Logan's voice was clear for everyone to hear. "I'll have a team at the gate when you land in 30 minutes. Should I alert airport police as well?" "That might be prudent," Marcus replied. "I've been physically assaulted by a staff member." The security guards had already released their grip, taking a step back as the realization dawned on them. Veronica's confident demeanor cracked completely, her eyes widening in dawning horror. "Sir, are you—" Bradley began, his earlier condescension evaporating. Marcus simply turned off his phone and raised an eyebrow at the now retreating flight crew. "I believe I'd like some ice for my cheek now. Have you ever been judged by your appearance rather than your character?" Comment number 1 if you've experienced discrimination in a public place like Marcus. Hit that like button if you believe people should be treated with respect regardless of how they're dressed or what they look like. And subscribe to see more stories of justice prevailing against discrimination. Would Veronica face real consequences, or would her connections protect her from the brewing storm? What powerful forces might be behind the systematic discrimination at Skyline Airways? The remaining 30 minutes of the flight transformed into an excruciating exercise in sudden politeness. Veronica had vanished to the back of the plane, while other crew members practically fell over themselves offering Marcus drinks, snacks, and profuse apologies. The security guards had retreated to the rear of the aircraft, suddenly fascinated with some invisible task that kept them far from seat 2A. Bradley, who had questioned how Marcus could afford his ticket, now hovered nearby with an ice pack and a first aid kit, his hands visibly trembling. "Sir, I want to personally apologize for the misunderstanding." "Was it truly a misunderstanding, Bradley?" Marcus asked quietly, holding the ice pack to his swollen cheek. "Or is this standard procedure for black passengers in first class?" Before Bradley could stammer through a response, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their descent into Chicago. What the captain didn't mention was the unusual welcoming committee assembling at their gate. As the plane taxied to the terminal, Marcus could see through his window what the other passengers couldn't. 3 black SUVs on the tarmac, alongside airport police vehicles and a cluster of individuals in Skyline Airways executive uniforms. News vans were already positioning themselves near the terminal entrance, alerted by the viral videos passengers had uploaded mid-flight. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, the flight's chief purser rushed to Marcus, a tall woman with graying hair who introduced herself as Diana. "Mr. Reynolds, on behalf of the entire crew, I want to express our deepest apologies. We had no idea that you were... That is, we didn't recognize that I was a human being deserving of basic respect," Marcus finished for her. "Or that I was your boss." Diana flushed deeply. "Sir, Veronica Winters doesn't represent our company values." "Actually, Diana, I'm concerned that she represents them perfectly," Marcus replied, standing to his full height. "What happens to black passengers who aren't CEOs? Do their complaints disappear like the others I've been investigating?" The question hung unanswered as the cabin door opened. First to board was Logan Pierce, Skyline's chief of operations, ashen-faced and perspiring despite the November chill. Behind him came the airline's legal counsel and head of security. "Marcus," Logan began, his eyes fixed on the cut and bruise forming on his boss's face. "I can't begin to..." Marcus raised a hand to silence him. "Where is she?" "Ms. Winters is being detained by airport security," Logan answered promptly. "She's claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that you were aggressive, and she felt threatened." Marcus nodded calmly. "I expected as much. I want the security footage from this aircraft downloaded immediately. My lapel camera caught everything, but I want all angles." Logan's expression flickered momentarily before he composed himself. "There might be a technical issue with the onboard cameras for this flight. Maintenance reported some system glitches." "How convenient," Marcus observed. "And how many other glitches happen when passengers file discrimination complaints?" Logan's silence was telling. As they moved toward the exit, Veronica's voice carried from the jet bridge where she was speaking to airport police. "He threatened me. Ask any of the crew. He was aggressive and tried to force his way into first class with an economy ticket." Marcus stepped into view, causing Veronica to falter mid-sentence. Behind her stood a distinguished older white man in an expensive suit, who Marcus immediately recognized as Richard Winters, one of Skyline's major shareholders and board members. The family resemblance between Richard and Veronica was unmistakable. "Uncle Richard!" Veronica exclaimed. "Thank goodness you're here. This man is trying to twist everything." Richard Winters placed a protective arm around his niece while extending his other hand toward Marcus. "Marcus, this is all an unfortunate misunderstanding. My niece is an exemplary employee with a spotless record. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." Marcus ignored the offered hand. "Interesting that you arrived so quickly, Richard. I wasn't aware the board was notified of every customer service incident." "I have friends at Chicago O'Hare," Richard replied smoothly. "They alerted me when they heard Skyline might be facing some public relations challenges." Marcus turned to the airport police. "Officers, I'd like to press charges for assault." "Now, Marcus," Richard's voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "Consider the optics here. A powerful black CEO persecuting a young woman over a minor incident? The media would have a field day questioning your judgment and leadership. Skyline. Stock could take a significant hit. For the first time, Marcus allowed a hint of steel to enter his voice. Are you threatening me, Richard? Warning a fellow board member about potential business implications isn't a threat, Richard replied with a thin smile. It's fiduciary responsibility. What neither man realized was that a passenger had paused on the jet bridge, recording their entire exchange. Within an hour, this video too would join the others circulating online, raising questions about power, privilege, and the true culture at Skyline Airways. As camera flashes erupted from the terminal where journalists waited, Marcus made a silent vow. This would not be buried like the other incidents. Whatever was rotting at the heart of his company would be exposed and excised, no matter who was involved. Richard leaned closer, his smile never reaching his cold eyes. Remember, Marcus, you may own the majority share, but the board can still vote to remove a CEO who becomes problematic. Choose your next steps carefully. In that moment, Marcus understood that the slap wasn't a random act of discrimination. It was the first visible symptom of a disease that had been growing undetected within his company, protected by power and privilege. And Richard Winters's presence suggested the infection reached all the way to the top. By midnight, the hashtag #SkySlap CEO was trending #1 nationwide. The videos captured from multiple angles showed the unprovoked assault in high-definition clarity, followed by the systematic attempt to remove Marcus from his rightful seat. News channels played the footage on continuous loop, each replay further damaging Skyline Airways' carefully cultivated image as a progressive, inclusive company. Marcus sat in his downtown Chicago penthouse, monitoring the unfolding media frenzy while his PR team frantically called from the crisis management room they'd established at headquarters. He had instructed them to issue only a brief statement, confirming an investigation was underway, offering no further comments until all facts were gathered. This restraint was driving them to distraction. "Sir, we need to get ahead of this narrative," his communications director pleaded over speakerphone. "Veronica Winters has already given 3 unofficial interviews painting herself as the victim of workplace intimidation." Marcus raised an eyebrow at the television screen where Veronica was indeed speaking tearfully to a sympathetic morning show host. "I was just doing my job," she sniffled. "He became aggressive when I politely asked to see his boarding pass. As a woman alone, I felt threatened and reacted instinctively to protect myself." The host nodded solemnly. "And you had no idea he was the company's CEO?" "None whatsoever," Veronica replied, dabbing at non-existent tears. "He was dressed like he didn't belong in first class. And now he's using his power to destroy my career because I made an honest mistake." Marcus muted the television. "Who authorized her to speak to the media? All employees are bound by contract to refrain from public statements during active investigations." An uncomfortable silence followed before his legal counsel admitted, "Richard Winters apparently provided her with his personal attorney, who's arguing that the contractual obligation infringes on her free speech rights." The mention of Richard Winters sent Marcus to his computer where he pulled up the shareholder registry. Richard Winters had held a respectable but not controlling 8% of Skyline shares for years. But according to the latest update, that percentage had quietly increased to 15% over the past 3 months through a series of shell companies. Significant, but still not enough to threaten Marcus's majority control. Or so he thought, until his phone rang with an urgent call from Sarah, his executive assistant. "Sir, we've just received notice of an emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Richard Winters initiated it, citing urgent leadership concerns regarding recent public events." Marcus frowned. "He doesn't have authority to call an emergency meeting without my approval." "He secured signatures from 2/3 of the board members, sir," Sarah replied, her voice tight with concern. "According to corporate bylaws, that overrides the normal procedure." Before Marcus could respond, his tablet pinged with a news alert. Skyline Airways stock had plummeted 27% since market opening. Institutional investors were publicly expressing concerns about leadership stability and potential systemic issues within corporate culture. His phone buzzed with another call, this time from Logan Pierce. "Marcus, you need to see this immediately. Within seconds, AE SETI video link appeared in his messages. The video showed Veronica Winters in what appeared to be a private meeting with several Skyline executives, including Logan himself, dated 3 weeks earlier. They were reviewing passenger manifests, with Veronica circling certain names. "These passengers should receive special attention," she was saying as Logan nodded approvingly. "My uncle says we need to maintain the right image for our premium class services." The video cut abruptly, but the implication was clear. Skyline had been systematically profiling passengers based on their names, likely targeting those who appeared to be minorities for additional scrutiny or harassment. "Where did this come from?" Marcus demanded. "It was sent anonymously to several news outlets 20 minutes ago," Logan replied, his voice unsteady. "Marcus, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." "It looks exactly like what I've suspected for months," Marcus countered. "Discrimination has been encoded into our operations, hasn't it, Logan? With your knowledge and participation." Logan's hesitation was confirmation enough. "Richard Winters has been influential in certain operational decisions. He convinced several executives that maintaining a certain passenger aesthetic in premium classes would protect our luxury brand image." Marcus ended the call without another word, his mind racing. The slap hadn't been a random incident of racism. It was part of a deliberate policy, likely targeting him specifically once they realized he was traveling incognito to investigate complaints. His security chief called next. "Sir, we've detected unusual access attempts on our customer complaint database. Someone with high-level credentials is systematically deleting records going back 18 months. The pieces were falling into place. Richard Winters wasn't just covering up discrimination. He had been orchestrating it, using his niece and other employees to enforce an unwritten policy of exclusion. And now, with Marcus's public exposure of the incident, Winters was accelerating his efforts to seize control of the company. Marcus's phone wouldn't stop ringing as more revelations emerged. Former employees began calling news stations with stories of being fired after objecting to discriminatory practices. Minority passengers shared accounts of being downgraded from first class without explanation. Current staff leaked internal memos suggesting profile management of the passenger experience. As the night progressed, Marcus received an encrypted message from an unknown sender. "Winters meeting with competitor CEOs now. Hostile takeover being discussed. Watch your back." By dawn, Warsha Sky SLAPS CEO had evolved into Skyline Truth and Winters racism, as the public narrative shifted from a single incident to recognition of a systemic problem. But while public opinion seemed to support Marcus, the financial damage was mounting. The stock had now dropped 35%, wiping billions from the company's market value. Marcus's phone rang again. It was Richard Winters himself. "I'm offering you one chance to walk away cleanly," Winters said without preamble. "Resign citing personal reasons. Sell your shares to my consortium at yesterday's closing price, and we'll ensure you receive a generous severance package. Fight me, and I promise there won't be anything left of your reputation or your company when I'm done." Marcus let the threat hang in the air for a moment before responding. "You seem to have forgotten something critical, Richard." "And what's that?" Winters asked with audible disdain. "I built this airline from nothing once before," Marcus said calmly. "I can do it again if necessary, but you've spent your life taking shortcuts and standing on others' shoulders. Without your privilege and connections, what exactly would you have?" Winters' laugh was cold. Bold words from a man about to lose everything. "I'll see you at the board meeting, Marcus. Bring a cardboard box for your personal items." As Marcus ended the call, he realized the fight ahead would be about much more than a slap, or even his company. It was about exposing the insidious ways racism remained encoded in corporate America, protected by power, money, and influence. What he didn't yet realize was just how far Richard Winters would go to maintain that system, or how dangerous the coming days would become. Marcus arrived at Skyline headquarters at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the emergency board meeting. Security personnel looked nervous as he badged through, their usual greetings replaced with uncertain nods. Word had clearly spread that the CEO's position might be in jeopardy. "Sarah," Marcus called as he entered his executive suite. His loyal assistant was already at her desk, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't gone home. "I've been compiling everything we have, sir," she said, handing him a tablet. "It's worse than we thought." The tablet contained hundreds of complaints from minority passengers, all mysteriously marked resolved without any actual resolution. Many included disturbing keywords: seat reassignment, removed from first class, questioned about ticket validity, subjected to additional screening. The pattern was unmistakable. "How many years back does this go?" Marcus asked, scrolling through the damning evidence. "At least 3, Sarah replied. "It intensified 18 months ago when Richard Winters joined the Service Quality Committee." Marcus nodded grimly. "And the deleted files?" "Our IT security team managed to recover most of them from backups. Someone with executive clearance was systematically purging complaints filed by passengers with flagged names." Sarah pulled up an internal document titled Passenger Experience Guidelines that had never crossed Marcus's desk. It contained thinly veiled instructions for identifying passengers who might diminish the premium class experience for standard clientele. The document never explicitly mentioned race, but the coded language was clear to anyone reading between the lines. "Who authorized this?" Marcus demanded. "It has Richard Winters' digital signature, but Logan Pierce implemented it across all flight crews last year. They disguised it as a customer experience enhancement protocol." Before Marcus could respond, his private line rang. The caller ID showed it was Darius Washington, Skyline's chief information officer, and one of the few executives Marcus implicitly trusted. "You need to get to the server room now," Darius said without preamble, his voice hushed and urgent. "They're trying to wipe everything." Marcus was moving before the call ended. The elevator ride to the basement server facility took only moments, but when the doors opened, he found 2 security guards he didn't recognize blocking his path. "This area is restricted due to maintenance," one stated flatly. "You'll need to return upstairs." Marcus straightened to his full height. "I'm Marcus Reynolds, CEO of this company." The guards exchanged glances. "We have orders from Mr. Pierce that no one enters without his authorization, for data security purposes." The absurdity of being denied access to his own company's servers might have been amusing under different circumstances. Instead, Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed Darius, putting the call on speaker. "The server room is locked down with unknown security personnel," Marcus said. "They're stalling," Darius replied immediately. "I'm watching the data transfers in real time. Someone's mass deleting the passenger complaint database and all internal communications related to the Special Attention Protocol." Marcus ended the call and fixed the guards with a steely gaze. "Step aside now, or you'll be charged with corporate espionage and destruction of evidence in a federal investigation." The bluff worked. The younger guard hesitated before muttering into his radio. After a tense moment, they reluctantly stepped aside. Inside the server room, Marcus found Darius frantically working across multiple terminals, while 2 technicians he didn't recognize were disconnecting hard drives. "Stop what you're doing immediately," Marcus commanded. The technicians froze, looking past Marcus to the doorway where a new figure had appeared. Richard Winters stood with his arms crossed, several board members flanking him like an entourage. "This is merely standard data protection protocol, Marcus. Given the potential legal exposure from yesterday's unfortunate incident, we're securing vulnerable systems." "By deleting evidence," Marcus challenged. "By protecting proprietary information," Richard countered smoothly. "The board has concerns about potential data leaks during this sensitive time." One of the board members, Janet Chen, stepped forward with visible discomfort. "Marcus, we weren't informed about any data deletion. Richard assured us this was routine security maintenance before the meeting." Richard's expression hardened momentarily before his practiced smile returned. "Perhaps I wasn't clear enough. We're simply securing systems while legal assesses our exposure." "Darius," Marcus called without taking his eyes off Richard, "what exactly is being deleted?" "Everything related to passenger complaints for the past 3 years," Darius answered, "plus all communications mentioning the words profile, special, attention, or passenger selection." Janet Chen's eyes widened. That sounds like destruction of evidence. It's standard data lifecycle management, Richard insisted. Old complaints are routinely purged. Not without a retention review, Marcus countered. And certainly not hours before a board meeting, regarding discrimination allegations. The tension in the room was palpable as other board members began murmuring among themselves. Richard's confident facade cracked slightly as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. Darius, Marcus continued, please lock down all systems and revoke all administrative access except your own until further notice. Board members, I suggest we move our emergency meeting forward since we're all here. As they headed toward the boardroom, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. Check your personal email. Evidence of wider conspiracy. Not safe to talk. The anonymous tip led to a folder of encrypted files containing communications between Richard Winters and executives at competing airlines. The conspiracy wasn't limited to Skyline. It extended industry-wide, with major carriers quietly implementing similar discriminatory practices under the guise of premium class experience management. More disturbingly, the files revealed a systematic effort to identify and terminate employees who raised concerns about these practices. Marcus recognized several names as promising staff members who had suddenly resigned or been fired for performance issues. As he entered the boardroom, Marcus realized the confrontation ahead was about more than saving his position or even his company. It was about exposing a cancer that had metastasized throughout the entire industry, protected by powerful people who believed discrimination was acceptable if it preserved their vision of luxury. The stakes became clearer still when a security chief slipped him a note just before the meeting began. Death threats received at your home address. Private security dispatched. Winters has connections to extremist groups opposed to minority-owned businesses. Marcus took his seat at the head of the boardroom table, facing 14 faces that would decide the immediate fate of Skyline Airways and, perhaps, the future of equality in the airline industry. Richard Winters sat at the opposite end, his confident smile suggesting he already knew the outcome. What Richard didn't know was that Marcus had been recording everything since the moment he entered the building. Every conversation, every attempted deletion, every threat, all preserved as evidence for what was to come. Have you ever discovered something corrupt in a place you thought you could trust? Comment number 1 if you've ever uncovered dishonesty or discrimination in your workplace or school. Hit that like button if you believe transparency is essential for accountability. And make sure to subscribe to see more stories of courage against systematic injustice. How far would Richard Winters go to protect his discriminatory system? Could Marcus find enough allies to fight against powerful interests determined to maintain the status quo? What would happen to Veronica now that her role in the larger conspiracy was exposed? Ladies and gentlemen of the board, Richard Winters began with practiced gravitas. We face an unprecedented crisis that threatens the very existence of Skyline Airways. Marcus observed the room carefully. Of the 14 board members present, he could immediately identify 6 who were firmly in Richard's camp, based on their body language and the knowing glances they exchanged. 4 others appeared genuinely concerned about the allegations, while the remaining 4 seemed to be waiting to see which way the wind would blow before committing. Yesterday's unfortunate incident, Richard continued, while regrettable, has been weaponized into a false narrative about our company culture. A single employee's momentary lapse in judgment is being portrayed as evidence of systemic discrimination. Janet Chen interrupted. A momentary lapse in judgment doesn't explain the document instructing staff to give special attention to certain passengers. Richard's smile didn't waver. That protocol was designed to identify potential security concerns, not to discriminate. It's being mischaracterized. By whom? Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but commanding. The document never crossed my desk for approval, despite company policy requiring CEO review of all customer service protocols. Richard's eyes narrowed slightly. The Service Quality Committee has broad authority to implement experience enhancements without burdening the CEO with every operational detail. Not when those enhancements involve profiling passengers, Marcus countered. or when they result in hundreds of discrimination complaints that mysteriously disappear from our systems. The boardroom fell silent as Marcus distributed tablets to each member. What you're looking at is a sample of over 800 complaints, from minority passengers who experienced harassment, seat reassignments, or unwarranted security checks over the past 18 months. All were marked resolved without action or compensation. Board members began scrolling through the evidence, expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to calculated indifference. These complaints represent just those we could recover after. This morning's attempted data purge, Marcus added, watching Richard's jaw tighten. A purge ordered without my knowledge or consent. Richard leaned forward. The timing of these allegations is suspect. Marcus has been under increasing pressure for Skyline's disappointing quarterly results. This entire discrimination narrative conveniently deflects from his leadership failures. It was a calculated pivot, and Marcus noted with concern how several wavering board members nodded slightly at the mention of financial performance. Interesting timing indeed, Marcus replied. Our financial challenges began precisely when the passenger aesthetic protocols were implemented. Premium class bookings from minority passengers have dropped 47% in the past year. I wondered why until now. Before Richard could respond, the boardroom door opened and a courier delivered a sealed envelope to him. Richard's expression remained neutral as he read its contents, but a subtle flush crept up his neck. Perhaps we should take a brief recess, Richard suggested smoothly. We've only just begun, Marcus objected. We need to address the attempted evidence destruction this morning. Richard's smile turned cold. Actually, there's an urgent matter requiring private discussion among select board members. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. To Marcus's surprise, 8 board members stood to follow Richard out, giving him a sudden majority. Janet Chen shot Marcus an apologetic look before whispering, "Something's happening. They're pressuring key shareholders." During the recess, Marcus received a series of alarming messages. First, his legal team reported that Veronica Winters had filed assault charges against him, claiming he had grabbed her wrist before she defensively slapped him. Second, 3 major institutional investors had unexpectedly announced they were reviewing their Skyline holdings due to governance concerns. Finally, and most disturbingly, his home security system had detected unauthorized access attempts. When the board reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted perceptibly. Richard Winters returned with renewed confidence, accompanied by 2 people Marcus didn't recognize. For the record, Richard announced formally, I'm introducing Jeffrey Morris from Hemisphere Capital and Victoria Zhang from East Asian Airlines, who hold proxy voting authority for significant Skyline shareholders. Marcus understood the play immediately. Richard had leveraged his connections to bring additional voting power into the room, likely through hastily arranged proxy agreements. I move to temporarily suspend Marcus Reynolds from his duties as CEO pending a full investigation into yesterday's incident and broader concerns about company leadership, Richard stated. Under Bylaws Section 7.3, this requires a simple majority vote. The room erupted in objections and procedural questions, but Richard pressed forward. Those in favor? 8 hands went up immediately, joined after a moment's hesitation by the 2 newcomers. That's 10 votes in favor, constituting a majority of present voting interests, Richard declared with barely concealed satisfaction. This is procedurally invalid, Marcus's general counsel objected. Proxy votes must be registered 48 hours before board action. Emergency provisions allow for expedited proxy registration during crisis situations, Richard countered. Legal has already validated their standing. Marcus watched as his company was being stolen through procedural manipulation. And who will lead Skyline during this temporary suspension? The board has asked me to serve as interim CEO effective immediately, Richard replied, unable to completely suppress his triumphant smile. Security will escort you from the building, Marcus. Your access credentials have already been deactivated. The security team that entered wasn't Skyline's regular personnel but private contractors with earpieces and impassive expressions. Marcus recognized the implicit threat. This wasn't just about removing him from the building. One last thing before I go, Marcus said, standing with dignity. "I've forwarded evidence of discrimination, evidence tampering, and corporate conspiracy to the Department of Justice, the FAA, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Whatever happens here today, the truth will come out." Richard's smile didn't falter. "Former employees with grudges make allegations all the time, Marcus. Without access to company systems or records, you'll find it challenging to substantiate any claims. Now please exit peacefully to avoid further embarrassment." As Marcus was escorted out of the headquarters he had built from the ground up, employees watched in shocked silence. Some appeared confused, others frightened, but a few met his eyes with quiet resolve, suggesting he wasn't entirely without allies inside. Once outside, Marcus found his driver replaced by an unfamiliar chauffeur. "Sorry, sir," the man said. "Company vehicles have been recalled. I can take you home or to a hotel." "Neither," Marcus replied, already dialing his personal security team. Within minutes, a nondescript sedan arrived, driven by the head of his private security detail. "We need to go dark," the security chief advised once they were moving. "Your home security was breached 20 minutes ago. They copied your hard drives and planted something in your study. We're not sure what yet." Marcus nodded grimly. "They'll try to destroy my reputation next. Plant evidence, fabricate scandals, anything to discredit the discrimination claims." "It's already happening," the security chief confirmed, showing Marcus his phone. Breaking news alerts showed a story about documented anger issues and workplace intimidation by Marcus Reynolds, citing anonymous Skyline sources. Another article questioned his financial management, suggesting accounting irregularities under his leadership. By nightfall, the character assassination was in full swing. Former employees suddenly appeared on news programs claiming Marcus had created a hostile work environment. Financial analysts who had previously praised his leadership now expressed long-standing concerns about his management style. Social media accounts began circulating doctored videos showing Marcus making offensive comments, sophisticated deepfakes. That would take time to disprove. Most alarming was the announcement that Skyline Airways would be restructuring its diversity initiatives to focus on merit-based advancement rather than quota-driven hiring, a clear signal that Richard Winters was already dismantling the inclusive culture Marcus had built. From a secure location, Marcus watched as the company he had built from nothing was being transformed overnight into precisely the kind of discriminatory institution he had created Skyline to counteract. Richard Winters wasn't just stealing his company, he was perverting its very purpose. What Richard couldn't know was that Marcus had prepared for this possibility. Years of facing discrimination had taught him to always have contingency plans. Somewhere in the city, Darius Washington was downloading backup copies of the evidence Richard thought he had destroyed. Janet Chen was quietly documenting the procedural violations from the board meeting, and dozens of loyal employees were preparing to become whistleblowers, gathering evidence of the systematic discrimination being institutionalized under Winters' leadership. The real battle was just beginning, and despite the apparent victory, Richard Winters had underestimated his opponent in one crucial way. Marcus Reynolds had spent his entire life fighting against powerful people who believed the rules didn't apply to them. He hadn't come this far to back down now. The morning news hit like a series of calculated blows. Skyline CEO removed amid allegations of financial misconduct, screamed one headline. Former employees allege pattern of abuse by Reynolds, claimed another. Most damaging was the breaking story. Exclusive. Video shows Reynolds berating minority staff member. The video, clearly doctored but convincingly so, showed Marcus apparently shouting racist remarks at a tearful employee. Within hours, civil rights organizations that had initially supported him began distancing themselves, issuing cautious statements about waiting for all facts to emerge. Marcus watched from his hotel room, having abandoned his compromised home after security teams discovered listening devices and cameras installed during the breach. His phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comment, former allies questioning his integrity, and anonymous callers leaving threatening messages. "They're thorough," observed Darius Washington, who had resigned from Skyline rather than serve under Richard Winters. "They've been planning this for months." "The question is why," Marcus replied, pacing the secure room. "This goes beyond racial discrimination or even a power grab. Richard could have quietly implemented his policies without this elaborate conspiracy. It's not just about Skyline," Darius said, turning his laptop to show Marcus a spreadsheet. "I've been tracking stock movements across the airline industry. There's a pattern. Every time a minority-owned airline or one with strong diversity initiatives gains market share, they face similar crises. Manufactured scandals, sudden leadership changes, financial irregularities." Marcus leaned closer, seeing the data pattern emerge. Over the past 5 years, 7 promising airlines with minority leadership had been targeted in similar ways. Each followed the same trajectory: public scandal, leadership removal, acquisition by larger conglomerates, abandonment of diversity initiatives. "Operation Skyfall," Marcus murmured, remembering the cryptic reference in earlier evidence. "It's not just Richard. It's an industry-wide effort to eliminate minority ownership and leadership. And you were the biggest target because you were the most successful," Darius concluded. "Skyline proved that diversity wasn't just a social good but a business advantage. Your profitability threatened their narrative." Before Marcus could respond, his secure phone, known only to his most trusted circle, rang with a call from Janet Chen. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," she said without preamble. "Richard called an emergency vote to approve a merger with Atlantic Global Airways. They're claiming it's necessary to stabilize the company after the leadership crisis." That's why the stock was deliberately tanked, Marcus realized. They wanted to drive the price down for a cheaper acquisition. "It gets worse," Janet continued. "They've frozen your Skyline stock, claiming potential insider trading concerns. You can't vote your shares or sell them until an investigation is complete." The strategy was becoming clear: isolate Marcus, destroy his reputation, strip him of his voting power, and sell the company before he could mount an effective defense. His personal phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Check your foundation records. They're next." Within the hour, breaking news reported that the Reynolds Foundation for Educational Access was under investigation for financial irregularities. The foundation, which provided scholarships to minority students in aviation and aerospace, had been Marcus's pride and joy. The allegations suggested scholarship funds had been misappropriated for personal expenses, a blatant lie, but one that would tarnish both his business and philanthropic reputations. By afternoon, Marcus's former allies were falling one by one. Board members who had initially supported him issued statements expressing shock and disappointment at the emerging allegations. Business partners announced they were re-evaluating their relationship with his ventures. Even his alma mater announced it was reviewing his position on their advisory board. The isolation strategy continued as negative stories flooded social media. Former classmates suddenly remembered troubling incidents from college. Anonymous sources claimed he had used discriminatory hiring practices himself, but hidden them behind diversity initiatives. Doctored photos showed him at events with controversial figures he had never met. Most painful was the discovery that his medical records had been hacked and altered. News sites were reporting he had been diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder and had hidden the condition from the board, a complete fabrication, but one that seemed designed to explain away his supposed angry outbursts. When Marcus attempted to issue public denials, he found his social media accounts suspended for violation of terms of service. News outlets that had previously covered his success story now refused to publish his rebuttals, citing ongoing investigations. The personal attacks extended beyond his reputation. His sister called in tears after being fired from her teaching position for unspecified concerns. His elderly parents reported strange vehicles parked outside their retirement community. His college roommate's business was suddenly facing an unexpected tax audit. The message was clear: anyone associated with Marcus Reynolds would suffer consequences. That evening, as Marcus returned to his hotel after meeting with his legal team, he found the door ajar. Inside, his room had been ransacked, with "Know Your Place" spray-painted across the wall. His secure laptops were missing, along with the physical evidence he had gathered against Richard Winters. For the first time since the crisis began, Marcus felt a moment of genuine despair. The conspiracy against him was more extensive and powerful than he had imagined, reaching into media, healthcare systems, financial institutions, and apparently even law enforcement, which had dismissed the hotel break-in as a routine burglary. When he tried to check into another hotel under an assumed name, his credit cards were declined. His bank accounts showed pending fraud investigations. Even his most loyal friends were now hesitant to take his calls, fearful of the reach of his enemies. The isolation was nearly complete when his phone rang with a call from his primary attorney. "They've frozen all your assets," she informed him gravely. "And the FBI just requested all our communications under subpoena. They're claiming potential wire fraud involving Skyline and your foundation." The fabricated criminal investigation was the final step in Richard's strategy, not just to take Marcus's company but to destroy him completely, ensuring he could never rebuild or challenge the status quo again. As night fell, Marcus found himself sitting alone in his car, apparently defeated, his company stolen, his reputation in tatters, his financial resources frozen, and even his closest allies under threat. Richard Winters had executed a nearly perfect takedown, using the very system supposedly designed to ensure fairness and justice. But in the darkness of that car, illuminated only by the glow of his last secure device, Marcus was reviewing a hidden file he had maintained for years. It contained contingency plans for scenarios most people would consider paranoid, including the complete destruction of his public identity. What Richard Winters didn't understand about Marcus Reynolds was fundamental. A lifetime of facing discrimination had taught him to always prepare for the worst, to build backup systems for his backup systems, and to create insurance policies against the most powerful enemies. As Marcus activated Protocol Phoenix, a contingency plan even his closest advisors didn't know existed, a series of encrypted messages deployed to servers across the globe. Whatever happened next, the truth would not remain buried. The only question was whether Marcus himself would survive to see justice done. The abandoned warehouse on Chicago's South Side seemed an unlikely command center for what had become a shadow war against one of the most powerful corporate conspiracies in the airline industry. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus Reynolds had seemingly disappeared, with media speculation ranging from suicide to flight from justice. Richard Winters had publicly expressed deep concern for his former colleague, while simultaneously dismantling every diversity initiative at Skyline Airways. Inside the warehouse, converted shipping containers housed a sophisticated operation. Darius Washington managed a network of secure servers, while Janet Chen coordinated with a growing team of whistleblowers still inside Skyline. Marcus, nearly unrecognizable with a shaved head and beard, studied the evidence wall where the full scope of Operation Skyfall was finally taking shape. "We've confirmed connections between Richard Winters and executives at 7 major airlines," reported Maya Patel, a former Skyline data analyst who had resigned rather than comply with data manipulation orders. "They've been coordinating for at least 5 years to systematically eliminate minority-owned airlines and diversity initiatives industry-wide." Marcus nodded grimly. "And the white supremacist connection?" "Confirmed," Darius replied, pulling up encrypted communications on his screen. "Winters doesn't just have business motivations. He's ideologically driven. He's been funneling millions, from Skyline's consulting budget to front organizations with explicit white nationalist agendas." The evidence was damning. Richard Winters and his allies weren't merely protecting their business interests. They were advancing a deliberate agenda to maintain racial homogeneity in airline ownership and leadership, using corporate resources to fund extremist groups, under the guise of industry consultants. "The Aviation Country Club," Marcus murmured, recalling the dismissive phrase a banker had once used when rejecting his first loan application to start Skyline. They never intended to let outsiders truly succeed. The team's biggest breakthrough had come from an unexpected source: Bradley, the flight attendant who had questioned how Marcus could afford his first-class ticket. Racked with guilt after seeing the systematic destruction of Marcus's reputation, he had reached out through secure channels with crucial information. "Veronica was placed on your flight deliberately," Bradley had revealed in his recorded testimony. They knew you were traveling incognito to investigate discrimination complaints. The slap wasn't spontaneous. She was instructed to provoke an incident that could be used against you. But the most damning evidence came from Richard Winters' own security negligence. Despite his careful conspiracy, he had held a meeting at his lake house where he had explicitly outlined the next phases of Operation Skyfall to his inner circle. Unknown to him, Marcus's security team had managed to plant recording devices during a catering delivery. "We've eliminated the Reynolds problem," Winters could be heard saying on the recording. "Once the Skyline acquisition is complete, we'll use the same playbook against Sing Air in California and Washington Regional. Within 5 years, we'll have restored proper control of all major routes." Another voice asked about potential legal exposure, to which Winters had laughed dismissively. "Who's going to stop us? We own the regulatory channels, the media narrative, and enough judges to ensure nothing sticks. The Reynolds takedown proves our methodology works perfectly." What Winters couldn't have known was that Marcus had spent his life building relationships across communities that Richard considered beneath his notice. While Winters controlled boardrooms and country clubs, Marcus had connections with community organizers, civil rights attorneys, ethical journalists, and government investigators who hadn't been compromised. "We're ready to move to Phase 2, Marcus announced to his team. "How many whistleblowers do we have confirmed?" 43 from Skyline, Janet Chen reported, plus 27 from other airlines involved in Operation Skyfall. All have signed affidavits and preserved evidence. "The regulatory filing is prepared," added former Judge Elaine Michaels, who had joined Marcus's shadow legal team. "Simultaneous submissions to the DOJ Antitrust Division, FAA, EEOC, and SEC. Once filed, they legally cannot be buried without explicit malfeasance." Marcus studied the coalition he had built while the world thought he was destroyed. Former competitors who had faced similar discrimination. Journalists who had been pressured to publish hit pieces but had kept records of the coercion. Federal investigators frustrated by previous cases being mysteriously reassigned. They represented the counter-network to Winters' conspiracy, people who believed in merit, fairness, and equal opportunity. "Tomorrow we end this," Marcus stated with quiet determination. "Not just for Skyline, but for everyone they've targeted." The synchronized operation began at dawn. While Richard Winters was appearing on a morning financial show touting Skyline's fresh direction and the nearly completed acquisition by Atlantic Global, 43 Skyline employees simultaneously submitted whistleblower filings with supporting evidence. 27 employees at other airlines did the same. As Winters stepped off the television set, his phone exploded with alerts. Federal agents were executing search warrants at Skyline headquarters, his private office, and the offices of 6 other airline executives implicated in Operation Skyfall. The stock trading algorithms that had been manipulated to attack minority-owned airlines were being seized by SEC investigators. Most damaging was the release of the full recording from Winters' Lake House meeting to selected ethical journalists who had resisted pressure to join the smear campaign against Marcus. Within hours, like Operation Skyfall and Dark Airline conspiracy were trending nationwide, with the original whistleblower recordings being played unedited on news programs. Veronica Winters, facing potential conspiracy charges, broke ranks first. In exchange for leniency, she provided detailed testimony about how she had been instructed to provoke an incident with Marcus, confirming she had been placed on his flight, specifically to create a pretext for his removal. As the evidence mounted, Richard's carefully constructed alliance began to fracture. Board members rushed to claim they had been misled. Financial backers issued statements denying knowledge of discriminatory practices. Corporate partners announced reviews of their relationships with implicated executives. By mid-afternoon, an emergency Skyline board meeting had been called. Richard Winters appeared confident as he entered, but his smile faded as he saw Janet Chen distributing evidence packets to each board member. "What is this?" he demanded. "The truth," Janet replied. "Simply, every discriminatory policy, every manipulated complaint, every communications with white supremacist organizations, every detail of Operation Skyfall." "This meeting wasn't authorized," Richard objected, looking around for support that wasn't forthcoming. "Actually, it was," came a voice from the doorway. Marcus Reynolds walked in, flanked by federal agents and his legal team. The room fell silent as he took his seat at the head of the table. "Impossible," Richard whispered, his composure cracking for the first time. "We destroyed you." "You tried," Marcus corrected calmly. "But you made a critical mistake, Richard. You thought discrimination was just a convenient business tool. But for me and millions of others, it's a reality we've spent our lives learning to fight. You were playing a game. We were fighting for survival." As federal agents presented Richard Winters with a warrant for his arrest on charges of conspiracy, securities fraud, and civil rights violations, Marcus revealed his final card. His apparent disappearance had been strategic, not to hide, but to coordinate the most comprehensive response to corporate discrimination in aviation history. "Your Phoenix Protocol," Darius whispered with newfound understanding. It wasn't just about survival. It was about building the coalition to expose everything. Marcus nodded. "Sometimes you have to let your enemies believe they've won to see how far their corruption extends." The board voted unanimously to reinstate Marcus as CEO and cooperate fully with federal investigations. By evening, similar scenarios were playing out at boardrooms across the industry as the full scope of Operation Skyfall was exposed. What had begun with a SLAP had uncovered one of the most extensive conspiracies of corporate discrimination in modern history. As Marcus reclaimed his office that night, he knew the fight wasn't over. Richard Winters was just one node in a network that believed diversity threatened their control. Dismantling that network would take years, but the first decisive battle had been won. Have you ever seen justice finally prevail after it seemed all hope was lost? Comment number 1. If you believe persistence against discrimination eventually pays off, even when the odds seem impossible, hit that like button if you were relieved to see Marcus finally turn the tables on Richard Winters and his conspiracy. And make sure you're subscribed to see the final chapters of this incredible story of courage against corporate corruption. How would Skyline Airways transform after this scandal? What consequences would Richard Winters and his co-conspirators ultimately face? And could the airline industry truly change after decades of systemic discrimination? Marcus knew that exposing the conspiracy was only the first step. To truly transform the airline industry and ensure lasting change, he would need a coalition powerful enough to withstand the inevitable counterattacks from those who still held significant influence despite Richard Winters' arrest. "They'll regroup quickly," Marcus warned his core team gathered in Skyline's restored executive boardroom. "Richard may be in custody, but his network remains largely intact. We need to move faster and more decisively than they expect." The immediate challenge was rebuilding Skyline's reputation while simultaneously pursuing justice against all participants in Operation Skyfall. Marcus implemented a three-pronged strategy: legal accountability, industry reform, and corporate transformation. For legal accountability, he assembled a formidable team. Elaine Michaels, the former federal judge, coordinated with prosecutors building cases against Richard Winters and his co-conspirators. Civil rights attorneys prepared class action lawsuits on behalf of discriminated passengers and employees. International aviation authorities launched their own investigations into foreign carriers implicated in the conspiracy. "The evidence is overwhelming," Elaine reported. "Winters and at least 14 other executives will face federal charges ranging from conspiracy and fraud to civil rights violations. The paper trail connects them directly to white supremacist organizations through shell companies and consultant contracts." For industry reform, Marcus reached out to minority executives across transportation sectors, many of whom had faced similar discrimination, but lacked the resources to fight back effectively. Together they formed the Transportation Equity Alliance, creating a united front to advocate for systemic changes in hiring, promotion, and service policies. Most surprising was Marcus's outreach to progressive executives at competing airlines, who had been sidelined or silenced by Operation Skyfall's influence. These internal allies provided crucial intelligence about ongoing resistance to diversity initiatives within their companies, identifying additional conspirators who had escaped the initial investigations. "We've confirmed 5 more board members at major carriers who were active participants," reported Janet Chen, who now headed Skyline's corporate governance division. "They're already working to minimize the scandal's impact and preserve discriminatory practices under new names." The alliance's most unexpected member arrived unannounced at Skyline headquarters. Amanda Winters, Richard's daughter and heir to the Winters family fortune. Unlike her father, Amanda had spent years working with civil rights organizations, much to Richard's disapproval. "My father's views never represented mine," she explained during her first meeting with Marcus. "I've spent my life trying to counteract the damage he's done, mostly in secret to maintain access to family resources that I redirected to equity initiatives. Now I want to do it openly." Amanda provided devastating evidence about her father's decades-long involvement with organizations working to maintain racial homogeneity in corporate America. Her testimony, combined with financial records showing how the Winters family had systematically undermined minority business development across multiple industries, strengthened both the criminal cases and civil litigation. While building these external alliances, Marcus simultaneously transformed Skyline internally. Every discriminatory policy was publicly identified and eliminated. Employees who had enforced these policies faced appropriate consequences, from retraining to termination, depending on their level of involvement. Those who had resisted the discrimination or become whistleblowers were recognized and promoted. "The airline that emerges from this crisis will be fundamentally different," Marcus promised during an all-staff meeting. "Not just superficially, diverse but structurally equitable in ways that will set new standards for the industry." Most crucially, Marcus established independent oversight mechanisms that would prevent future discrimination from taking root undetected. A diverse passenger advocacy board with actual authority to investigate complaints and recommend policy changes. Anonymous reporting channels protected from executive interference. Regular third-party audits of service quality across passenger demographics. As these reforms took shape, Skyline faced significant resistance. Advertisers with connections to Richard's network threatened to withdraw. Financial analysts with similar ties issued negative forecasts. Social media campaigns attempted to portray the company as pursuing reverse discrimination or sacrificing quality for political correctness. The alliance Marcus had built proved its value as these attacks mounted. Civil rights organizations mobilized their members to support Skyline through the transition. Ethical investors stepped forward with needed capital. Journalists committed to accurate reporting countered misinformation with facts and evidence. By the time Richard Winters' criminal trial began 3 months after his arrest, the alliance had grown from a defensive coalition into a transformative force within the transportation industry. What had started with one CEO refusing to accept a discriminatory SLAP had evolved into a nationwide movement for corporate accountability and equity. As Marcus prepared to testify against his former board member and the architects of Operation Skyfall, he received an encrypted message warning of a potential assassination attempt during the trial. The conspiracy's most extreme members, facing financial ruin and potential imprisonment, had decided Marcus Reynolds could not be allowed to tell his story in court. The threat confirmed what Marcus had suspected all along. This wasn't merely a business dispute or even a civil rights issue. It was a fundamental struggle over who would be allowed to participate fully in America's economic future. And some would stop at nothing to maintain their advantage. The federal courthouse resembled a fortress on the morning of Richard Winters' trial. Federal marshals established a secure perimeter while counterterrorism units swept for explosives. Marcus arrived in an armored vehicle surrounded by private security specialists and federal protective details. National media had descended on Chicago, framing the proceedings as a landmark case exposing corporate America's hidden discrimination infrastructure. The public gallery was filled with civil rights leaders, industry executives, and family members of those harmed by Operation Skyfall's policies. As Marcus took the stand, he noticed Richard Winters studying him with cold calculation, rather than the anger or defeat one might expect from a man facing decades in prison. That unnerving confidence was explained during the first recess when Marcus's security chief approached with disturbing news. "We've intercepted communications indicating a multi-pronged attack on your testimony," the security expert explained, "in a secure room. They're not just coming after you physically, they're implementing a comprehensive plan to destroy the case itself." The strategy became clear as proceedings resumed. Richard's defense team submitted a motion claiming key evidence had been obtained illegally during vigilante hacking operations conducted while Marcus was in hiding. The judge took the unusual step of sequestering the jury to consider the motion, delaying Marcus's testimony. Simultaneously, Skyline stock plummeted as anonymous sources claimed the company faced imminent SEC sanctions related to financial disclosures during the crisis. Institutional investors received fabricated regulatory advisories, warning of potential liability for maintaining Skyline holdings. Most concerning was the coordinated media attack suggesting Marcus had orchestrated the entire controversy to distract from Skyline's financial problems. Doctored financial statements circulated, showing the airline had been insolvent before the SLAP incident, implying Marcus had manufactured the discrimination claims to avoid accountability for mismanagement. They're trying to create enough chaos and doubt to undermine everything we've built, Janet Chen observed as the team gathered in their secure operations center. If they can't win in court, they'll win in public opinion. The counterattack escalated when Skyline's critical witness, Bradley, the flight attendant who had confirmed Veronica was specifically assigned to provoke Marcus, was found unconscious in his hotel room the night before his scheduled testimony. While doctors worked to determine whether he had been drugged or poisoned, the defense moved to have his previous statements declared inadmissible. Financial institutions with connections to Richard Winters began calling in loans and credit lines, extended to Skyline, creating an artificial liquidity crisis. Vendors with similar ties suddenly demanded accelerated payments. Travel booking sites mysteriously experienced technical difficulties that prevented Skyline flights from appearing in search results. The coordinated financial attack expanded to Marcus personally when the court-appointed monitor overseeing the freeze on his assets reported irregularities, requiring an extension of the restrictions. This left Marcus funding his legal defense and security through rapidly dwindling resources that hadn't been frozen during the initial assault on his finances. Most alarming was the discovery that 3 judges assigned to various aspects of the case, the criminal prosecution, civil litigation, and regulatory matters, had undisclosed connections to organizations funded by the Winters family. When Marcus's legal team raised these conflicts of interest, they faced accusations of attempting to improperly influence the judiciary. They prepared for every contingency, Marcus realized as these attacks unfolded, including losing the initial battle. The conspiracy's most dangerous countermove came during a transcontinental Skyline flight, carrying key physical evidence and 2 federal agents transporting it to Chicago. Mid-flight, the aircraft experienced simultaneous failures in multiple critical systems, forcing an emergency landing. During the evacuation, the evidence was nearly lost in what appeared to be a random baggage handling error until an alert crew member intervened. Forensic analysis later confirmed sophisticated sabotage had caused the system's failures, demonstrating how deeply Operation Skyfall's influence extended into aviation maintenance and security protocols. As the trial proceeded despite these setbacks, Richard Winters made an unexpected move. His attorneys approached Marcus with a proposed settlement. Richard would plead guilty to lesser charges and provide testimony against higher-level conspirators in exchange for a reduced sentence and partial immunity from civil litigation. He's trying to buy time, Elaine Michaels warned when Marcus brought the offer to his advisory team. There are no higher-level conspirators. He was at the top. This is a tactic to gain access to our evidence and witnesses under discovery while he rebuilds his defense. Marcus declined the offer, but Richard's strategy achieved its secondary purpose, creating the public impression that the true culprits remained at large, with Richard merely a scapegoat for more powerful interests. The most dangerous moment came during Marcus's resumed testimony. As he described discovering the systematic discrimination within Skyline, a court officer positioned directly behind him subtly reached inside his jacket. Only Amanda Winters. Sharp observation and urgent warning to security prevented what was later confirmed to be an assassination attempt by an infiltrator with falsified credentials. The failed attempt proved a turning point in public perception. Media coverage shifted from skepticism about Marcus's claims to shock at the lengths the conspiracy would go to silence him. The judge ordered unprecedented security measures for the remainder of the trial, including screened remote testimony for vulnerable witnesses. Despite the obstacles, the prosecution methodically presented overwhelming evidence. Thousands of discriminatory incidents documented across multiple airlines. Financial transfers between Richard Winters' shell companies and white supremacist organizations. Internal communications explicitly discussing strategies to restrict minority advancement in the industry. Testimony from former conspirators who had accepted plea deals. When the defense finally presented its case, their strategy became clear. Frame Operation Skyfall, not as discrimination but as legitimate business strategy to maintain brand consistency in premium services. Their expert witnesses argued that passenger demographics were marketing decisions, not civil rights matters. This approach collapsed when prosecutors introduced Richard's own recorded words. The problem isn't about service quality, it's about maintaining natural order in an industry that symbolizes American achievement. Some people simply don't belong in the cockpit or the boardroom, and certainly not in first class. As the trial neared its conclusion, Marcus received intelligence that Richard's remaining allies were preparing one final desperate counterstrike. Having failed to derail the legal proceedings, they planned to destroy Skyline itself through a coordinated attack on its operational infrastructure, crippling its reservation systems, maintenance records, and flight operations simultaneously. The warning gave Marcus just enough time to implement emergency protocols, temporarily shifting critical systems to secure backups, while federal cyber units traced the attack to its source. When executed, the sabotage affected only decoy systems, while providing conclusive evidence linking the remaining conspirators to criminal activity. With this final counterattack neutralized, the outcome of Richard Winters' trial was all but certain. The jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all major counts. As Richard was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, he locked eyes with Marcus one final time, not with defeat, but with a chilling promise that the war was far from over. Marcus understood the unspoken threat. The prejudices that had fueled Operation Skyfall hadn't disappeared with Richard's conviction. They had merely lost one battle in a longer struggle that would continue across boardrooms, courtrooms, and cultural battlegrounds for years to come. But for the first time, the battlefield had been exposed to public view. The systems that had protected discrimination under the guise of business decisions were now subject to unprecedented scrutiny. And Marcus Reynolds had proven that justice, while difficult and dangerous to pursue, was possible even against the most entrenched power structures. Richard Winters' conviction should have marked the beginning of a new era in the airline industry. Instead, it triggered an even more coordinated resistance from the remaining power structures that had facilitated Operation Skyfall. While Richard awaited sentencing, the network he had built continued functioning with frightening efficiency. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated," Marcus observed during a crisis meeting with his leadership team. "This was never about one man, or even one company. It's an entrenched system protecting itself." The resistance manifested across multiple fronts simultaneously. Regulatory agencies that had initially supported the investigation now found themselves under intense political pressure to avoid overreach into legitimate business decisions. Congressional committees with oversight responsibility were suddenly focused on unrelated matters. Career officials who had championed the case faced reassignment or early retirement. Legal challenges multiplied exponentially. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every procedural decision in the Winters trial became subject to appeals claiming violations of due process. Judges who had issued favorable rulings faced unprecedented scrutiny of their personal and professional lives from shadowy opposition research operations. "They're trying to bury us in paper and process," Elaine Michaels explained. "Even with the conviction secured, they can tie up implementation of penalties and reforms for years through procedural challenges." The economic warfare intensified as a coordinated industry response emerged. Major airlines simultaneously announced they would no longer code-share with Skyline, effectively cutting it off from the global aviation network. Maintenance contractors with ties to implicated executives found scheduling difficulties that delayed critical Skyline aircraft servicing. Fuel suppliers imposed surcharges specifically targeting Skyline routes. Most alarming was the discovery that air traffic control procedures had been subtly adjusted to disadvantage skyline flights, placing them in longer holding patterns and less efficient routing corridors. This systematic discrimination was nearly impossible to prove, but created cumulative operational disadvantages that threatened the airline's recovery. "They're treating us like we're radioactive," Janet Chen reported after another airline canceled a long-standing partnership agreement. "Even executives who privately support our reforms won't publicly align with us. They're afraid of becoming targets themselves." The financial system proved equally hostile. Banks that had eagerly extended credit to Skyline under Marcus's previous leadership now cited industry volatility to justify onerous terms or outright rejections. Investment analysts issued negative guidance despite improving operational metrics. Credit rating agencies placed Skyline on review for downgrade based on governance uncertainties rather than actual financial performance. Marcus's personal financial situation deteriorated in parallel as institutions froze his accounts pending compliance reviews that stretched indefinitely. Properties he owned faced suspicious tax reassessments or zoning challenges. Investment partners in his non-aviation ventures received anonymous but detailed warnings about reputational risks of continued association. The harassment extended to everyone connected with exposing Operation Skyfall. Whistleblowers found themselves blacklisted across the industry despite theoretical legal protections. Journalists who covered the story faced unusual scrutiny of their past work and personal lives. Even passengers who had submitted discrimination complaints reported unexplained difficulties with everything from credit applications to employment background checks. "They're sending a message," Marcus concluded. "Challenge the system and you'll be systematically erased from legitimate participation in the economy." The most sophisticated attack came through manipulation of public opinion. Op-eds appeared in major publications questioning whether anti-discrimination enforcement had gone too far in the Skyline case. Research papers from prestigious universities suddenly identified significant costs of diversity initiatives in transportation safety and efficiency. Social media campaigns portrayed Marcus as an opportunist weaponizing race for business advantage. These coordinated efforts achieved significant impact. Public support for the broader investigation into industry discrimination declined, as the narrative shifted from clear ethical violations to complex regulatory debates. Political allies who had initially championed the cause began moderating their positions, citing balanced approaches and collaborative solutions rather than accountability and justice. Marcus recognized the playbook from centuries of resistance to equality, shifting the conversation from moral imperatives to technical complexities, exhausting reformers through procedural delays, isolating champions of change, and gradually returning to discriminatory practices under new terminology and justifications. The breaking point came when Marcus was traveling to a crucial meeting with international aviation authorities. Despite having proper documentation and security clearance, he was detained at the airport when a confidential terrorist alert mysteriously appeared in the security system. While eventually released, he missed the meeting where critical decisions about global aviation equity standards were being finalized. Investigation revealed the false alert had originated from compromised law enforcement databases. Someone with high-level access had deliberately targeted Marcus to undermine the international regulatory effort. More disturbing still, the same pattern had affected other minority aviation executives attempting to participate in similar forums. As these systematic attacks continued, Marcus faced a painful realization. The legal victory against Richard Winters, while significant, had merely exposed the outer layer of a much deeper and more resilient system of exclusion. The visible conspiracy had been prosecuted, but the invisible infrastructure supporting it remained largely intact and actively hostile. The ultimate betrayal came from an unexpected source. Marcus's chief security advisor, whom he had trusted implicitly throughout the crisis, was discovered passing sensitive information about Skyline's defensive strategies to Richard's remaining network. The advisor had been compromised through a combination of blackmail and financial inducements orchestrated from Richard's detention center using coded messages through his legal team. This infiltration at the highest level of Marcus's operation threatened to unravel everything he had built. Contingency plans were compromised, witness protection protocols exposed, and strategic legal approaches revealed to opponents before implementation. Most critically, the security breach had exposed vulnerabilities in Skyline's revamped operational systems that could be exploited for catastrophic disruption. With his trusted circle penetrated, his financial resources dwindling, his public support eroding, and systematic resistance mounting across every sector, Marcus faced the darkest moment since the original crisis began. The system he had challenged was fighting back with everything at its disposal, demonstrating why so few had dared to confront entrenched discrimination at this scale. For a brief moment, Marcus considered the possible necessity of compromise, accepting partial reforms while allowing the deeper structures of inequity to persist. It was the path most change agents eventually took when faced with the full force of systemic resistance, claiming partial victories while abandoning comprehensive transformation. As he contemplated this potential retreat, Marcus received a secure communication from an unexpected source. Amanda Winters, who had disappeared from public view shortly after her father's conviction, had not been idle. Working with allies across multiple industries, she had been documenting the retaliatory campaign against Skyline and everyone associated with exposing Operation Skyfall. "The system reveals itself most clearly when threatened," her message concluded. "We now have unprecedented visibility into how discrimination is actually preserved and protected. This isn't the end. It's the opportunity we've been waiting for." Attached was a comprehensive analysis identifying the specific individuals, institutions, and mechanisms being used to undermine the reforms. The very resistance meant to defeat them had created a map of the previously invisible system. With this knowledge, a more strategic and comprehensive response became possible. Marcus Reynolds had started this journey seeking justice for a discriminatory SLAP. He now understood he was engaged in something far more significant: exposing and dismantling mechanisms of exclusion that had persisted for generations by adapting to each challenge while maintaining their essential function. The system was fighting back with everything it had, which meant it recognized the existential threat Marcus and his allies represented. That desperate resistance, painful as it was to endure, confirmed they were on the right path. 6 months after Richard Winter's conviction, Marcus Reynolds stood alone on the observation deck of Chicago O'Hare International Airport, watching aircraft from dozens of airlines taxi, take off, and land in the afternoon sun. Among them were the distinctive blue and silver planes of Skyline Airways, still flying despite everything the system had thrown against them. His contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of Darius Washington, now Skyline's Chief Innovation Officer. "They're all here," Darius announced. "Every single one." Marcus nodded and followed his colleague to a private conference center adjacent to the airport where an extraordinary gathering had assembled. Civil rights attorneys sat alongside airline executives. Government investigators mingled with international aviation authorities. Whistleblowers who had risked everything to expose discrimination shared tables with industry reformers who had fought the same battles from inside the system. At the center of it all stood Amanda Winters, who had transformed from a reluctant witness against her father into the architect of the most comprehensive corporate accountability initiative in aviation history. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began as the room quieted, "especially those who traveled despite the unusual difficulties many of you experienced." This drew knowing laughter. Nearly everyone present had faced some form of harassment or obstruction while traveling to this meeting. 6 months ago, we exposed Operation Skyfall and secured a conviction against its most visible architect. We believed that would be enough to create lasting change. Marcus paused, surveying the room. "We were wrong." Screens around the room activated, displaying a complex network diagram mapping the systematic resistance they had encountered. Regulatory interference, financial manipulation, media distortion, legal obstruction, and technological sabotage, all coordinated to preserve discriminatory systems despite Richard Winter's removal. What we initially identified as a conspiracy within the airline industry was merely the visible portion of a much larger infrastructure designed to maintain exclusive control of economic resources, Marcus continued. When we challenged one component, the broader system activated to protect itself. Amanda Winters stepped forward. My father wasn't the mastermind. He was just one willing participant in something much older and more pervasive. The real power lies in the interconnected systems that make discrimination appear as natural market forces rather than deliberate exclusion. For the next hour, the assembled experts methodically dissected how discrimination had been encoded into seemingly neutral business practices across the transportation sector. Algorithms that determined ticket pricing and upgrade availability, financing mechanisms that evaluated airline creditworthiness, hiring and promotion systems that perpetuated homogeneity in leadership, security protocols that disproportionately targeted minorities. The revelation isn't that discrimination exists, Marcus explained. It's that it has been systematically embedded in operational procedures that appear race-neutral while producing consistently discriminatory outcomes. This understanding had led to the creation of a comprehensive response, the Aviation Equity Alliance, formally launching today, with combined resources exceeding $20 billion and participation from regulators in 17 countries. Unlike traditional diversity initiatives focused on representation, the alliance would address the structural mechanisms that preserved inequality regardless of who held specific positions. It would create new standards for algorithmic accountability in passenger service, establish independent oversight of security protocols, develop alternative financing models for minority-owned aviation businesses, implement whistleblower protections with actual enforcement capacity. Most importantly, Marcus emphasized, membership in the alliance requires submitting to binding equity audits that examine outcomes rather than intentions. Airlines will be evaluated not on their diversity statements, but on measurable service, quality across passenger demographics. The announcement represented a fundamental shift in approach. Rather than fighting individual discriminatory incidents or pursuing isolated bad actors, they would transform the underlying systems that made discrimination profitable and sustainable. As the formal presentation concluded and working groups began detailed implementation discussions, Marcus stepped away to a quieter area where Janet Chen waited with a tablet displaying breaking news. Richard Winters was just sentenced, she reported. 25 years for conspiracy, fraud, and civil rights violations. The judge cited the unprecedented nature of the enterprise and its fundamental threat to equal protection under law. Marcus absorbed this news with complex emotions. Richard's conviction and sentencing represented accountability for past harm, but the true measure of success would be preventing future discrimination through systemic change. There's more, Janet continued. Federal prosecutors just announced indictments against 27 additional executives involved in Operation Skyfall, including 3 former regulatory officials who obstructed previous investigations. The simultaneous timing wasn't coincidental. Marcus had coordinated with prosecutors to ensure the alliance launch coincided with these indictments, demonstrating both accountability for past violations and structural reform to prevent recurrence. As the day progressed, the full scope of their coordinated response became clear. While the Chicago meeting focused on industry transformation, parallel announcements occurred across the country. The Transportation Department unveiled new equity requirements for federal contracts. Consumer protection agencies introduced standardized discrimination complaint procedures with meaningful enforcement mechanisms. Congressional leaders announced hearings on algorithmic bias in travel services. By evening, when Marcus boarded a Skyline flight for the first leg of a global tour promoting the alliance, financial markets had already responded. Airlines that had joined the initiative saw stock prices rise as institutional investors recognized the long-term advantages of equitable service models and reduced discrimination liability. Those that remained resistant faced shareholder questions about sustainable business practices. The flight crew greeting Marcus represented the transformed Skyline, diverse not just in appearance but in career pathways that had brought them to aviation. The captain had entered the profession through Skyline's Community College Partnership Program. The first officer was a military veteran from an underrepresented community. The cabin crew included former employees of airlines that had practiced discrimination, now trained in Skyline's equity-centered service model. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Marcus reflected on the journey that had begun with a discriminatory SLAP and evolved into a fundamental challenge to systems of exclusion. The personal cost had been enormous: financial hardship, reputation, attacks, constant security concerns, broken relationships with former allies. Yet the alternative, accepting discrimination as inevitable, had never truly been an option. His tablet pinged with a message from Amanda Winters, who was leading a parallel alliance launch in Europe. "My father just issued a statement from prison claiming this is all an overreaction to a minor misunderstanding between a flight attendant and a passenger. Some things never change." Marcus smiled slightly at the irony. Richard Winters still couldn't comprehend that the SLAP itself had never been the issue. It was merely the visible manifestation of invisible systems designed to maintain inequality, while providing plausible deniability to those who benefited. The final confirmation that their approach was working came from an unexpected source. Marcus's security team intercepted communications between Richard's remaining allies, revealing their growing alarm at the comprehensive nature of the reforms. "This goes beyond window dressing," one wrote. "They're actually changing the rules of the game." That was precisely the point. Diversity initiatives had traditionally focused on bringing new players into a game with rules designed for their disadvantage. The Aviation Equity Alliance was instead rewriting those rules to ensure everyone competed on genuinely equal terms. As Skyline's aircraft soared through the night sky, Marcus recognized that their work had just begun. Entrenched systems wouldn't yield easily to reform, regardless of how well designed. The resistance would adapt, finding new methods to preserve old advantages. Complete transformation would require sustained vigilance across years and decades, not just months. But for the first time, the architecture of discrimination had been fully exposed. Not just individual acts of bias, but the interconnected systems that normalized exclusion under the guise of business necessity. With that visibility came the possibility of lasting change. The SLAP that had started this journey represented everything wrong with a system that presumed to judge human worth based on appearance rather than character. The alliance now taking flight represented the possibility of a different approach. One where access to opportunity reflected merit rather than privilege, and where justice wasn't merely an aspiration, but a measurable reality. As dawn broke over the Atlantic, Marcus watched the sun illuminate the aircraft's wing from his window seat. In aviation, he had found both his greatest challenge and his most meaningful purpose, transforming an industry that literally connected the world into one that reflected the full diversity of that world, not just in who it served, but in who controlled its future. The journey toward genuine equity would be neither short nor easy, but as Marcus had learned throughout his life, meaningful change never was. What mattered was continuing to move forward, even when the headwinds seemed impossible to overcome. Justice, like Skyline itself, had taken flight, and this time, no one would succeed in forcing it to land prematurely. The story of Marcus Reynolds teaches us that real change requires more than exposing individual acts of discrimination. It demands challenging the entire system that normalizes and protects such behavior. When Marcus faced that humiliating SLAP, he could have simply used his power for personal revenge, but instead chose to uncover the deeper network that enabled such discrimination to flourish. His journey reveals how power structures fight to maintain inequality, not through obvious racism, but through seemingly neutral business practices, financial mechanisms, and regulatory processes. These sophisticated systems are designed to appear race-neutral, while consistently producing discriminatory outcomes. We learn that dismantling such entrenched systems requires extraordinary resilience. Marcus faced character assassination, financial warfare, and even physical threats, yet persisted because he understood the stakes extended far beyond his personal experience or single company. Perhaps most importantly, this story highlights the difference between superficial diversity initiatives and true structural change. Simply adding diversity to a biased system doesn't solve the underlying problem. Real transformation comes from rewriting the rules of the game to ensure genuinely equal opportunity for all. The final lesson lies in the power of strategic alliance building. No single person, regardless of resources or determination, can transform entrenched systems alone. Victory comes through uniting whistleblowers, ethical executives, legal experts, and community advocates around a common vision of accountability and equity. Discrimination thrives in silence and isolation. Its greatest weakness is exposure to the full light of public scrutiny and unified opposition. What systems of discrimination have you witnessed in your own life that hide behind business decisions or standard practices? Have you ever been in a position like Marcus where standing up for justice meant risking everything you've built? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose injustice and celebrate those brave enough to fight it. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them today. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, lasting change begins when courage meets opportunity. And one person refusing to accept injustice can spark a movement that transforms entire industries.